Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to This Week in Magic Online Finance. I'm your host, Chaz Andres, and as always, we're going to get started by talking about this week's top stories. The biggest piece of news by far, Dominaria preview season almost over. We know most of the contents of the set at this point, and it looks pretty darned awesome. I'm not sure what kind of an impact it's going to have on Standard yet, but we've got at least a couple of top-tier playables that we have to talk about. Now, it's been a little while since the set has had two top-tier Standard playable Planeswalkers, but I think Dominaria is going to break that trend. Both Karn, Scion of Urza, and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, strike me as incredibly playable, powerful Standard walkers. Well, Karn has been hyped up a lot. It is currently the most expensive card in Dominaria. I feel like Teferi has flown more or less under the radar, and that's one I'm going to be looking to pick up early if the price stays fairly reasonable. Moving on to some of the other cards I like, Steelleaf Champion, History of Benalia, and Phyrexian Scriptures all seem eminently Standard playable to me. Steelleaf Champion is absurd in a deck with Llanowar Elves. It's going to be fairly narrow, but it's going to see play. History of Benalia, meanwhile, is a ton of value for 3 mana, and I think that one's going to actually end up seeing play in multiple good decks. Now, Phyrexian Scriptures, I feel like, has flown pretty low beneath the radar, and that's because people are comparing it to Damnation. And no, it doesn't compare favorably to Damnation, except in specific corner cases, but Damnation would be the most powerful card in Standard if it were legal. So there's a lot of room for a card to be playable, even good, below the bar set by Damnation. And I think Phyrexian Scriptures is going to find at least one really solid home during its run in Standard. On the flip side of things, I'm a little bit worried about Mox Amber. Now look, from a fanboy perspective, I love this card. Wizards has yet to print a bad Mox. It could be really awesome. It could be the chase card of all chase cards in this set, but 20 or 30 tickets for a card that might not be playable in any format? I realize I'm going to look really stupid for saying this if Mox Amber ends up being the card that some people think it will be, and it very well might be that, but that's too much risk for me. I don't like risking my bacon on that much money. And so if I open a Mox Amber at the pre-release or in the first few days of legality, I'm going to be selling it ASAP. Let's move on to gaining ground. Where in Standard, the card that gained the most ground this week, yet again, was Carnage Tyrant. It jumped about a ticket and a half from 19.5 up to 21, which really does show the current sluggishness of the Standard market. It has not taken off yet like I thought it would based on the Dominaria previews. I do think that's coming over the next couple of weeks, but it hasn't happened yet. Let's actually take a moment and spend a little more time with Carnage Tyrant, see if we can figure out what's actually going on there. Now, it bottomed out in January around the 7 ticket mark. It's been slowly creeping up since then, and I've tried to figure out why, but I can't really make heads or tails of it. Maybe it's because it sees some play in Vintage Oath, maybe it's because it sees some play in Modern Scapeshift, but it isn't in the most popular list of either of those decks, so I'm not sure why it's this high. It's possible that it's just because Ixalan is kind of a low value set, and that value has to go somewhere. And that's why I'm not sure Carnage Tyrant is a sell right now, even though it would be normally based on the lack of play it sees in its current value. Especially because Dominaria is about to release, and I do think that if Carnage Tyrant starts to see a bunch of play, it has the sort of profile of a card that's going to hit 30, even maybe up to 40 tickets, so I'm holding. Let's move on to Modern, where the biggest gainer of the week, Engineered Explosives, up 6 tickets from 50 all the way up to 56, continuing to gain value, and of course, that is because Hollow One is the most popular deck in Modern right now. It's explosive, it's been winning everywhere. You need at least one copy of Engineered Explosives for that sideboard. It's really good in the metagame right now, it hasn't been printed in forever, and the paper price is approaching the $80 mark, which is pretty crazy, but I do think this is really the sort of next Chalice of the Void, and I expect it to stay fairly high, at least until the card is reprinted, which probably isn't going to happen this year, or the metagame changes. Let's move on to our big losers. We're in Standard. It's the Scarab God, continuing its spring-wide tumble from 28 down to 25. And look, I just don't know what's going to happen here. On the one hand, the Scarab God is supremely unfun, and it's going to rotate soon. On the other hand, it's still the most powerful card in Standard. It still sees more play than any other flagship card, so I'm not sure where we're heading. If I had to make a call, I'm going to say that Dominaria hype is going to start driving this card back up. It is going to rebound. It's a buy right now, but honestly, this could go either way at this point, so it's a bit of a risk if you do decide to buy in. Let's move on to Modern, where it was another poor week for Jund. Tarmogoyf was our biggest loser, dropping 4 more tickets from 39 down to 35, and as Jund sort of falls out of Modern's top tier, these cards are going to continue losing value. Jund is still the most expensive tier deck in Modern, so there's some value to give. The erosion rate does seem to be slowing, so we might be approaching something of a lower plateau for these cards. Regardless, I'm selling. Jund has to show me more than it's showing me right now for the deck to be worth what it is. Now this week's sneak is everybody's favorite flying spaghetti monster, Emrakul the Aeon's Torn. Now, Emrakul was just 7 tickets back in February. It's up over 13 tickets now and continuing to climb. It sees play all over Eternal Magic, in Vintage, and Legacy, and Modern, and in Paper Magic, it's up over $40 and has been for a while. I see no reason why the online version can't at least hit the 20 ticket mark, so I'd grab your copies now if you think you're going to need them. Let's end the week by taking a look at the MTGO Trader's sales data over the past 7 days. As always, this gives us a great idea of which cards are selling the most right now on Magic Online, regardless of price fluctuations. Now, in terms of sales by volume, those multi-format commons and uncommons still the most sold cards. Things like Lightning Bolt, Fatal Push, Field of Ruin that you need for pretty much every deck, dominating those standings. Once we move down to rares, however, we're looking at Thoughtseize as our most sold rare of the week. I still think that one's going to pop off at some point, and then we have a newcomer, Birds of Paradise. I really like Birds of Paradise right now. There's a trillion copies out there on MTGO, of course, printed in a bunch of different sets, but you can buy an entire playset for less than a ticket, so there's no risk, and it sees play in lots of different Modern decks. At this point, I'm going to start adding a couple of sets onto pretty much every order I buy, just in case at some point it decides to make a run. Moving on to overall value sold, the list is chock-a-block with Modern staples. It's yet again things like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Leon of the Veil, Noble Hierarchs on there, Collective Brutality, Horizon Canopy, not much Standard to be seen. The best performing Standard card, Walking Ballista, which tells me that it's probably going to survive rotation pretty well since most of that value comes from its eternal playability. And then we have Rekindling Phoenix as our number 2 Standard seller, and that tells me that that card may actually do something and make a move once Dominaria is released, so it's one I'll be looking into as a spec over the next couple of weeks. That's all I got for you this week. I'm Chaz Andres for This Week in Magic Online Finance, and I will see you next Monday morning.